This sports a Vintage-Uhr Cal 71, which is very cool. Whatever. Okay.
Video's done.
See you next week. Hey everyone, this episode of Under the Radar going over a 1940s Jardur Bezelmeter Aviation Chronograph. This sports a Vintage-Uhr Cal 71, and it's an absolutely beautiful sports watch out of a very cool era in watchmaking. It's kind of a niche chronograph with some pretty cool applications, so let's get into it. Jardur was founded in 1937 by pilot and airplane enthusiast Samuel Klepper. The Jardur Import Company was an American brand based in New York City, and they essentially did protractors, flight calculators, navigation plotters. If it had to do with navigation and aviation and timing, they had something to sell you. But their signature product was the Jardur Bezelmeter Aviation Chronograph. Using Swiss-made cases and movements, the Bezelmeter were specifically designed with pilots in mind. I would say in kin to like the Breitling, however, not as well known, of course. The dial and bezel of these watches, of course, bezelmeter, were specifically intended to aid in the navigation and flying procedures of pilots. So it's just an extremely purpose-built watch, kind of no-nonsense design. It is very beautifully made, and I think it's kind of one of those things where it's like form meets function. It's designed correctly, so therefore it is beautiful. But there is some different kind of nods to it that I really enjoy personally. So with getting the history out of the way on this watch, I think it would be good to kind of touch on some of its tools, its features, because it is a watch that has so many different applications to it. Getting to the bezel, which the watch is named after, the Bezelmeter. It's a 12-hour countdown bezel that rotates bidirectionally, and it was created with the intention of giving the wearer a rough approximation of flight duration. Now going to the dial, it is a black gilt dial. It is extremely beautiful, especially when these watches are in extremely good condition. They're absolutely gorgeous watches. There is a red degree meter around the outer track, and this was designed specifically to help pilots complete standard rate aviation turns. I have no idea what that means. Standard rate turn is turn which an airplane is completed at 3 and 2 minutes and is done by having a turn of 3 degrees per second. All right, which is definitely one of like the more niche dial features that I think I've ever seen on a watch, specifically a pilot's watch. But this thing is pretty wild. It's essentially like a cockpit instrument on your wrist, but it's also very beautiful. I really like wearing this watch. I like having this one specifically on wrist. I would say this one isn't in the most stellar condition. I would say it's a more wearable example that you don't have to worry about quite as much. The condition of the case is really impressive. The dial does show some degradation, which is kind of common to see in these, but it gives you a very sporty feel and design while giving you a very vintage aesthetic on wrist. I love the square pushers, or like the rounded long pushers. I love the oversized crown. I think the rotating bezel is just a great feature. And then that standard black gilt dial with those red accents. And there's a couple of different dial variations. There's a couple of different variations in hands. The one I have on my wrist specifically has more cathedral style hands, which are kind of a really cool detail that I happen to like. I don't think that they're like the most appropriate hands for an aviation watch. However, they are original to the watch, and I think they do have a really cool aesthetic to them. And they're filled with a lot of lume. So in low light situations, in this era when the lume was still active, it would have been a lot more appropriate. The size of this case is also much larger than you normally see out of this era. So something that really gives you that sort of 1940s feel, that's also sporty, that also has a more, I would say, modern sizing or case size, really gives you a lot of versatility with wearing this watch. These kind of have a cult following. However, not that many people know of them, especially because I think the brand went out of business a long time ago. There is a fair amount of research on them. However, they are still not mainstream at all, and I think they're definitely worth talking about more, specifically how cool they are, how good they look on wrist, and as far as a really interesting aviation watch goes, that's beautifully made with, of course, a Vintage-Uhr chronograph movement in it. I think there's a pretty big value proposition when talking about these things. If you can find them in stellar condition that are running well, I think that they will definitely move up in value as far as the awareness grows in them, because they are so niche. And if we know anything about niche vintage watches, they can only go up in value. But I would say that this is definitely an under the radar piece. I think right now you can find something in wearable condition in like the $5,000, under $5,000 range. This one specifically is for sale on our website at craftandtailored.com. And if you want to learn a little bit more about it, go ahead and click the link and check it out. But with that, I want to say thank you for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you enjoyed the video, you can follow us on Instagram at craftandtailored. And if you have watch questions, we are here to help. Drop us a line at info@craftandtailored.com. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next one.